Hello, it's Darren Moor again from the How to Survive Your Police Career website. Today's podcast is about acute behavioural disturbance, which is one of those subjects that all police officers need to understand because it might help them avoid a death following police contact. Oh, and the never-ending investigation that goes with it. There's a chapter on the subject in my book for new bobbies, How to Survive Your Early Years as a Police Officer, and I'm going to draw a lot upon that material in our podcast today. The chapter's entitled, for reasons that will become obvious, Calls Involving Naked People Can Be Deadly, and it goes like this. Have you been taught about acute behavioural disturbance, also known as excited delirium? I hope so, because going to an incident where someone is affected by this condition can be a life-changing event. For them, because approximately 10% of cases result in sudden death. Yeah, I think I'm going to repeat that. Approximately 10% of ABD cases result in sudden death. And for you, through spending the next few years of your life, having your actions forensically examined in response to this tragedy. It's important also that you understand ABD because your actions need to be different from those that you would generally use when someone is just being disorderly. So, what is ABD? Well, ABD typically develops from chronic drug use or serious mental illness. It can also develop as a result of sepsis, blood poisoning, or even low blood sugar, and possibly a combination of these factors. Whatever the cause though, you will find yourself being dispatched to a report of someone acting in a bizarre way. They may be described as aggressive or violent, perhaps showing extreme agitation and physical exertion, or, at the other end of the scale, just being erratic. Well, that describes roughly 90% of the people I deal with, you might say. But that's where ABD provides a massive clue as to what's going on in the life of this person. Because often, they're reported as being naked. Nakedness, along with being hot to the touch and profusely sweating, are classic signs of ABD, along with, according to the College of Emergency Medicine, that extremely aggressive and violent behaviour, excessive strength and continued struggle despite restraint, insensitivity to pain, acute psychosis with fear of impending doom, constant physical activity without fatigue, abnormally rapid breathing, a heart rate over 100 beats a minute and probably much more, and finally, hypothermia, overheating. That's why they've taken all their clothes off. Basically, they're boiling up while at the same time losing all of their inhibitions. With ABD, the person's heart rate is much faster than it should be. In fact, so much so that they're at risk of dying if not treated as a medical emergency. And that's the principal message of this podcast. As soon as you suspect that you're being sent to an incident of ABD, and that suspicion may arise simply through hearing that someone's naked and erratic, then declare it over the radio as such. And tell the operator that ABD is defined by the College of Emergency Medicine as a medical emergency, where the person may need to be given tranquilizers before they suffer a cardiac arrest. So, you will need an ambulance to be sent to the scene, as well as police, with the crew briefed as to what to expect. Finish off your lecture by pointing out that, again, according to our friends at the College of Emergency Medicine, ABD carries with it that 10% chance of sudden death. Well, that should focus their attention. Now, there are two reasons for you doing this. Firstly, and hopefully, you're going to get the medical assistance that you require should your person suffer a cardiac arrest in front of you. And it's never pretty doing CPR on some sweat-ridden naked person. But secondly, it justifies the way that you deal with them at the scene, because these actions will be different to those for someone not affected by ABD. Let's face it, under normal circumstances, when you go to an incident involving a disorderly person, then the situation tends rapidly to deteriorate to hands-on, and probably lots of hands-on. With ABD though, restraint is to be avoided where possible, because this, and the bum fight that follows, may be the final contributing factor that causes that cardiac arrest and then sudden death. Now, not laying hands on, of course, may go against all your instincts. It's natural for us, In fact, it's our duty to restrain someone if we fear that they're going to hurt themselves or others. It may also go against the helpful advice provided by the public observing this cabaret. But I reiterate, though, that with ABD, restraint may be the very worst thing to do. So, how should we respond instead? Well, anticipate from the outset, even while en route, that this person is going to go into cardiac arrest at some stage, and so you'll need a medical plan B for when it all goes wrong. How far is the ambulance away? I know they often refuse to give a journey time, but is there any indication? Have you or another patrol got a defib? Can one be brought out from the station? Are there any specialist units, public order or ARVs perhaps, with Teams medics available? And when you find the person and you firm up your suspicion that this is an ABD incident, then think in terms of containing as opposed to restraining. If they're positioned within a room, for example, and not causing any danger to themselves or others, then let them stay in that room. If they're out in public, then just picket some officers around them and hope to keep them there. If they move, then try to keep them within a bubble of bobbies. Offer reassurance in a calming voice. It's all right, mate, you're not in any danger. Because they may be extremely paranoid. I dealt with an ABD incident where the male was convinced that he'd escaped from some prison and police had been sent to murder him. He was absolutely terrified of us. Demonstrate non-threatening MVCs even if your own fight and flight reactions are going into overdrive. If you've got the public around you, or with their mobile phones out recording, then direct them to move away and create a safe environment. The chances are they won't, of course, because they're being idiotic, but at least you've told them, and so it's their responsibility if they get hurt. Your aim throughout this stage is to buy time until medical assistance arrives. You're trying to orchestrate it so that no hands-on occurs until there's someone skilled enough to deal with the medical side of things if it all goes wrong. And it probably will go wrong. Now, all of this, great though it sounds, may be terribly impractical, of course, because our person is doing something which means that they need to be stopped and restrained there and then. And if that's the case, then, well, so be it. The important thing is that you've demonstrated a mindset and a course of action intended to avoid or at least delay this. It makes for a much better day out of the coroner's inquest a few years later. If you need to restrain, then be aware that someone with ABD will classically be, as we said earlier, insensitive to pain and full of energy. They will also be slippery to hold because they're sweating so much. Think more than ever about the dangers of positional asphyxia. Try to avoid holding them face down in a prone position, but instead get them on their back so that it's easier for them to breathe. Don't forget that if they lay on their stomach with, as classically happens in all the excitement, bobbies on their back, then they won't be able to breathe properly and so will be fighting you even more. Remember to use lots of calming tac comms. The more, it's all right mate, you're going to be fine, you're perfectly safe, the better. Both for the benefit of your subject, but also that crowd videoing you with their phones. If practical, try and get something soft under their head. But always anticipate that they will go into cardiac arrest. Even when they've stopped resisting and have apparently calmed down, then prepare for cardiac arrest until assessed by the paramedics. And afterwards, don't take chances. If there's any suspicion of ABD, they need to go to hospital by ambulance, not a custody suite in a police van. Not that any decent custody skipper would accept them anyway. And don't be fooled just because they seem to have calmed down. My team's medic instructor used to describe incidents where it was only when the person had seemed to calm down that they then went on to suffer cardiac arrest and then die. A final couple of points before we finish. In my experience, some ambulance personnel and operators are unfamiliar with ABD. They may feel that what police are asking them to attend is a lesser incident than it is. Your police control room operator may also be unfamiliar with this issue, and that's where we have one of those lack of communication leading on to tragedy scenarios develop. Don't be afraid to be forceful over the radio, knowing that it's all recorded. Explain and repeat that 10% chance of sudden death over and over again until you get what you need. Now, listening to this, you may also be thinking, yeah, this all sounds logical, but, I'm pretty junior on the team. Who's going to listen to me when I say we shouldn't jump all over this person, but instead just keep away and call an ambulance? And that's a very good point. The dangers of ABD are not well known in policing circles, even amongst supervisors. And should you go to an incident involving it today, you might just find yourself the most skilled officer present to orchestrate the response simply because you've listened to this podcast. And thank heavens you did. So here's a solution. Go and speak with your supervisors and tell them how you've just learnt about ABD and wish to clarify what the team response would be if such an incident occurred today. It may be that they've never heard of the condition, so enlighten them. Any good supervisor, on hearing this information, would realise the importance of cascading it down to everybody else on the team. Perhaps at briefing, and maybe just by getting them to listen to this podcast. And so we get the message out to as many bobbies as possible, which can only be a good thing. Because that way, there's less chance of them going to coroner's court because someone's died. Well, that was a bit of a downer to finish on, wasn't it? But then it's hard to make this subject upbeat and cheery, I'm afraid. Hopefully you've been told about ABD already by your service. And if so, then please of course follow the training that they've given you. What we've discussed here is only designed to accompany that training, not replace it. And it's such an important subject to get your head around. Every few weeks at the moment, we seem to be hearing incidents in the media of deaths following police contact, which sounds suspiciously like acute behavioural disturbance. And the investigation of bobbies following these incidents, well, it can go on for years. Anyhow, thanks for listening. Check out our website, How to Survive Your Police Career, for other podcasts and articles around police health, relationships and welfare. And also information on our series of Police How to Survive books. Yeah, this is the sales bit, I'm afraid. But then what can we offer you? Well, we've got the How to Survive Your Early Years in the Police Service one, from which I've gleefully ripped off material for today's podcast. It's full of inside information and tips to make the first few years of your career easier. The type of stuff I would drip feed the youngsters of my team with when I was a skipper, because I was so fed up watching them make the same mistakes over and over again. Oh, and also clearing up those mistakes over and over again. So, if you're new to the service, read the book, avoid those disasters. And with the How to Survive Your Relationship with a Police Officer one, which you really want to buy your partner and get them to read, as it explains just what you're going through at work, and more importantly, how you can work together at home to make things better for the pair of you. And finally, we've got the main health book for bobbies, How to Survive Your Police Career. It's full of information for bobbies about sleeping and eating around shifts, exercise, injury prevention and recovery, mental health and trauma, bad dreams, relationships again, how to avoid infection and dangerous diseases, cancer, fire and water safety, looking after your eyesight when you spend half your life staring at computer screens, acid attacks, basically everything. In fact, you think of a health subject that might affect bobbies, and I'll be pretty fed up if we haven't covered it. So yeah, check out the books. They're an ebook or hardback. There's a podcast for each one on the website explaining all. And if you want to laugh, there's some really dodgy sales videos for each one, with me talking to the camera, with a face looking like I've just turned up for Sunday morning early turn and been told I've got a cup of custody at some nick, which is miles away and I don't really like. Well, thanks for that. Oh, and don't forget, and apologies if you're bored of hearing me say this, but we'd love to work with any police services or federations or any other organisations out there that want to collaborate on creating an app or any other materials for getting this information out to officers and staff. That might be nothing more than just having the books downloaded to your troops' work phones so they can access the materials whenever they want. All these things are possible. Just get in touch. We've done the research and come up with the answers, and we like to think that we present it in such a relevant and humorous way that the average bobby or member of staff will want to buy into it. So, get involved. Our information's just waiting to be tapped into. But anyhow, until next time, from How to Survive Your Police Career, stay safe and be lucky. Bye-bye.